Part 4, the 1958 conclave. All right. Let me close this. Okay.
Thousands fill St. Peter's Square as the conclave of the College of Cardinals begins. Cardinal Tisserand, Dean of the Sacred College, leads them to the Sistine Chapel, where they are sealed off from the outside world during their deliberations until the next pope is chosen.
This is Cardinal Giuseppe Siri, Archbishop of Genoa. Cardinal Siri was the most popular cleric in Italy at the time of the conclave, and the man most observers expected to be proclaimed pope. He was also Pius XII's desired successor. Pius XII made him Archbishop of Genoa when he was 40, and made him cardinal when he was just 47, at the time the youngest of the College of Cardinals. He was a staunch traditionalist and adamantly opposed to innovation. He is also the man many believe was the true pope elected at the 1958 conclave, 2 days before Angelo Roncalli.
Here is the Sistine Chapel, as set for the election of the 262nd pontiff. Each of the 51 cardinals present occupies his throne during each...
This is 77-year-old Cardinal Angelo Roncalli, a man who had been dismissed from his teaching position at the Lateran Seminary in Rome for promoting the revolutionary theories of Rudolf Steiner. He was also known to socialize frequently with high-level Freemasons, communists, and modernists. A man who Pius XII, at the behest of the FBI and the U.S. State Department, sent off to Venice as Archbishop in hopes to keep him out of trouble for the remainder of his life. Hardly a desirable profile for a papal candidate.
Actual round of balloting. The results are signaled by this stove to the watching world. Straw from old wine boxes is mixed with the unsuccessful ballots to send up black smoke. A successful ballot will be marked by white smoke. In the square outside...
What the narrator says here is not quite right. The ballots are always burned after every second balloting. When no one received enough ballots, wet straw is added to the ballots, which produces a thick, dark smoke. On the other hand, if a new pope is chosen, dry straw is added, which produces pure white smoke, easily distinguishable from the first type. It's a very simple procedure. Anyone can try it themselves in their backyard.
Eager attention is concentrated on the thin chimney atop the Sistine Chapel to the right of St. Peter's Basilica. It is almost noon when the first puff or fumetta appears. It's white.
This is the first fumetta, which appeared shortly before noon on the first day of balloting, Sunday, October 26th. The second fumetta, which we will see shortly, appeared at 5:55 p.m. and lasted a full 5 minutes before turning dark. It is important to note that at the previous papal conclave, which elected Pius XII, the white smoke burned for only 2 minutes.
Excitement fills the square until the second, black puff emerges moments later. Rebuffed enthusiasm makes the deadlock of the cardinals seem all the longer through the succeeding ballots.
Oh boy. Hold on. Using videos on PowerPoint is so clunky. Where was I? Hold on. Said, where was it? It said later that day as darkness. Oh, here we go. Around here.
All along through the succeeding ballots.
Later that day as darkness falls upon Rome, both literally and spiritually.
This footage was taken by journalist Jacques Perrault and produced and broadcast by French radio and television broadcasting. What you are seeing now is footage from the fateful Sunday evening in October 1958. Over 200,000 people are gathered in St. Peter's Square awaiting the new pope. Little do they know, as darkness falls on Rome, that an imposter is on hand waiting to claim.
So I just want to hear how many people he said were there. Hold on.
This footage from the fateful Sunday evening in October 1958. Over 200,000 people are gathered in St. Peter's Square awaiting the new pope. Little do they know, as darkness falls on Rome, that an imposter is on hand waiting to claim the chair of Peter. This is the very clear emission of white smoke which lasted for 5 minutes. Naturally, the cardinals and the men at the stove can hear the chorus of 200,000 voices celebrating the news. If a pope has not been elected, then it would be time to throw some wet straw into the stove and change the signal. But the white smoke persists. The announcer on Vatican radio, Padre Pellegrino, exclaims, "The smoke is white. There can be no doubt. A pope has been elected."
And of course, a pope was elected, Giuseppe Siri, but then he was, I guess you could say, what would be the right word for it? I'm trying to think of the word for that. He was blocked, like, basically he was, intimidated and all that kind of stuff. And a conflict ensued, right?
Reports go out around the world that a new pope has been elected. Vatican officials scramble to their positions to greet the new pope. The crowd looks to the balcony, where the pope should appear within 20 minutes. But no pope appears. Later that evening, Vatican radio announces that there had been a mistake and that no pope had been chosen. At the time of this event, it would have been inconceivable to most people that the election of a pope could be suppressed in such a way. But looking back over 50 years of destruction, many are arriving at this moment as the pivotal event in the decline of the church. The smoke signal was no mistake. Someone became pope that night. The subsequent question is, who was it? As mentioned before, Cardinal Siri was the man most people thought would succeed Pope Pius XII. We will now turn to two other sources who claim that Cardinal Siri became Pope that evening. Our first source is FBI consultant Dr. Paul L. Williams. Williams quotes two State Department declassified files in his book, The Vatican Exposed. In 1958, when the cardinals were locked away in the Sistine Chapel to elect a new pope, mysterious events began to unfold. On the third ballot, Siri, according to FBI sources, obtained the necessary votes and was elected as Pope Gregory XVII. On the next page, Williams continues. On the fourth ballot, according to FBI sources, Siri again obtained the necessary votes and was elected Supreme Pontiff. But the French cardinals annulled the results, claiming that the election would cause widespread riots and the assassination of several prominent bishops behind the Iron Curtain. The next source is best-selling author, Jesuit, and former papal advisor, Father Malachi Martin. In an interview in the late 90s, Father Martin was asked if there was any truth to the rumors that Cardinal Siri was elected pope. Father Martin gives a very frank response.
The truth is, he got sufficient votes twice to become pope in two conclaves. But he refused it. At least two, if not three. But he refused it. And he made quite clear, talking to us after those two conclaves, that yes, the votes were there, but he refused to take them. He refused to take them.
When the interviewer asks why Siri refused, Martin says,
I think mainly out of fear. I think his family was at stake. He was a Genovese family. They were fishermen originally, very extensive family. And he felt that there was too much physical and social danger for his family if he bucked the system. And remember that the two conclaves I'm talking about is the conclave of 1958, which elected John the 23rd, and the conclave of June 1963, which elected Paul the 6th. And they are very political conclaves.
The interviewer then asks if Siri refused because he thought he could not be an effective pope.
No, he felt that they wouldn't let him live. They were bent, not the whole thing was planned. They were bent on changing the church.
And you see, as I mentioned before, the whole thing about the shedding of the blood of the martyrs, the Pope in his exile dying a cruel death, this is all being showcased here by the fact that the Pope, Siri, believed that basically if he were to, publicly make it known that he was elected Pope and all this kind of stuff, he would be assassinated, right? His family would be potentially killed. There are reports about these dark forces threatening to bomb the Vatican or threatening to bomb Rome, that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of intimidation causing great fear to stifle the public proclamation or the public exercise of the papacy. And of course, he mentions here that Siri, according to him, Siri said he refused it, that kind of stuff. And there are reports of people who would ask Siri if he was the Pope and he'd deny it and stuff like that. And I think even with Father Trans, we're going to talk about later, when he initially asked Siri if he was the Pope, he tried to deny it and, tried to dodge the question and that kind of stuff, or not admit that he was elected. But as Tran kept pressing him, he eventually admitted, yes, I'm the Pope. You know what I mean? He had eventually admitted it, something like that. We're going to cover that stuff later. My details may be a bit hazy, but for a while, Siri kept it secret, the fact that he was elected Pope, and only people who were perhaps there or had some kind of direct communication with those who were there would be would know about this kind of thing. And as far as remember, Melanie of La Salette said that at first, we will not know which is the true Pope. You understand? And so this whole thing with Siri hiding the fact that he was the Pope, not admitting that he was in fact Pope Gregory the 17th and all that kind of stuff, is consistent with what Melanie of La Salette said about us not knowing who the true Pope is at first.
They weren't going to allow Siri in, because everybody knew what Siri would do. He simply, the whole thing was planned. They were bent on changing the church. And they weren't going to allow Siri in, because everybody knew what Siri would do. He simply put on his coat mail, he'd take his battle axe and go out and cut off heads. Siri would not make a compromise. So I think that he said, no, I can't do that because my family will suffer. And he has a large family. So he wouldn't do it. The whole thing was planned. 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 The whole thing was planned.
Despite the events of Sunday, October 26th, the conclave continued. 2 days later, on October 28th, the predetermined candidate, Angelo Roncalli, emerged as so-called Pope.
The conclave of cardinals has reached an agreement. The ancient signal to the world comes from the Sistine Chapel. Habemus Papam. We have a Pope, in the traditional phrase of centuries. The throngs who have waited in the square of St. Peter's rejoice with 500 million Catholics around the world. Elevated to the papacy, Angelo Giuseppe Cardinal Roncalli, shortly before his 77th birthday. Chosen after one of the shortest electoral conclaves in 600 years, he will reign as Pope John the 23rd, first pontiff to assume the name John since the 14th century. By the time the new head of the church appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's, one of the greatest crowds in Vatican history, over 400,000 jammed the square, with traffic snarling.
It's so sad to see these people, and he said over 200,000 people were there and stuff. I don't know if over 200,000 were there the following days as well, but all these people celebrating, oh, we have a Pope, and they're happy and stuff, and having no idea that the devil has just installed a satanic anti-Pope bent on leading them all into eternal darkness.
For miles around are those hurrying to be present. One of his first acts as Pope was to deliver an appeal for world.
But of course, is like, our situation is, very horrible. Of course, obviously. And for me, of course, it is a great source of agony, frustration, stress, torment. But then at the same time, I admire God's justice, I respect God's chastisement of the world, because basically, from my understanding, like, the main reason God has done this, allowed this to happen, is because people became tepid, their faith became weak, their zeal became weak, their morals degraded, people became more and more godless and stuff like that. And as a way to punish the world, God has taken the truth from them. God has allowed them to wallow away in darkness and perish forever, because they have not appreciated his church. They didn't appreciate having real mass. They didn't appreciate having the true faith. They didn't appreciate having a true pope. They didn't appreciate what God had gifted to them. And so as punishment, God has now taken it away. And if you see how godless and horrible the world is, you're like, yeah, like, I can totally see the world doesn't deserve to have a true pope in Rome. The world doesn't deserve to have access to the truth. The world doesn't deserve all of these extraordinary blessings that God used to give to the world, So in that way, I can see how the world is deserving of God's punishment and deserving of being abandoned by God and left to suffer in darkness. So I admire that aspect of God's judgment and God's justice, God determining to punish the world for its wickedness and to basically abandon them for not appreciating what he was doing for them. I can totally see that, and I respect it. I respect God's justice in this matter. Although for me, of course, I'm also deprived of the Pope being in Rome. I'm deprived of a real mass. I'm deprived of access to a real priest and stuff like that. But if I have to suffer along with the world in order for God's justice to be implemented and for God to exercise the punishment he deems necessary for the world, I respect that and I appreciate it. And as long as God wants me to suffer through it, I will have to suffer through it. All I ask is that he gives me the grace to suffer well, okay? And of course, doesn't send me to hell in the end.
Peace, this being after his initial appearance and delivery of the papal benediction to the throngs present to acclaim him.